Hi everyone, I'm Nadia, and in today's video, my mom is making a beautiful set of rose resin coasters. After mixing the part A and part B resin for about 3 minutes, she pours the resin into one larger cup and 2 smaller cups to add the pigments. She takes the larger cup of resin and stirs a little bit more to make sure it's well mixed before pouring into the molds. She tries to pour an even amount of resin into each mold and then moves on to do the pigments. She's going to be using just Resin's Luster Pigment Paste in the shade Fuchsia, along with Resin Pro's Color Fun Deluxe in the shade Oxide Red. She mixes the pigment before adding it into her cup because the luster tends to sink to the bottom. She adds a few drops of the Oxide Red and stirs that together well for a few minutes. She checks the opacity by tilting the cup and then checks the shade next to the rose petals. Then she decides to add in some purple, and she's using Resin Pro's Color Fun Deluxe in the shade Violet. She continues to add drops of purple and compare the shade next to the rose petals until she's satisfied with the color. Then she uses the torch gun to pop any air bubbles, and when using a torch gun, make sure to have it constantly moving so that you don't burn your resin or your silicone mold. Then she starts to apply her rose pigmented resin in the shape of 2 triangles. Here she decided to change things up a bit and to try it at a different angle. She goes back and adds more pigment into that inner area. Now she's ready to add in the rose petals. Before she does so, she dips her wooden stick into the resin, which allows her to pick up the rose petals very easily. She starts adding the rose petals in one by one into the clear resin. She adds 2 or 3 rose petals into each clear section. Now she's going to be slightly darkening the leftover resin by adding more drops of the Oxide Red and Violet. She mixes that together and then carefully applies it into the molds. The next pigment she's going to be using is just Resin's Luster Pigment Paste in the shade Rose Gold. She quickly pops any air bubbles and then stirs the pigment paste before adding it into her cup. Then she takes it away to be secretly mixed. And voila! She adds the rose gold pigmented resin into the center of the molds, and then with a wooden stick drags the pigment out. Next, she's going to be using gold and copper metallic powders. She pours some resin onto the table to then add the gold and copper metallic powders. She mixes the resin and metallic powders together and then starts applying it into the molds to outline the area where the rose pigmented resin is. Then she dips a paintbrush into the gold metallic powder and holds it over the molds to tap with one finger to create a splash effect. She takes some of the leftover clear resin and pours it into the clear area in the molds to open up that area a little bit so that the rose petals are more visible. She adds a few more rose petals into the molds, and here are the coasters the next day. She's flipping them around to the backside to be able to apply latex. She's applying latex to the outer edges of the back of the coasters so that when she applies a heat-resistant top coat, she doesn't have to worry about it overflowing and messing up the coasters. She applied a generous amount and spread it to the edges using a brush. It takes approximately 6 hours for the liquid latex to dry, and once it has, she turns the coasters around and props them up onto small cups. Now she's ready to add the top coat, and she pours some resin onto each one of the coasters. She uses the torch gun to pop any air bubbles and then spreads the resin to the edges using a brush. She's using her fingers to get the top coat onto the edges of the coasters as well. And here's the final product. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. Follow me on Instagram, Summer Girl Designs, and my mom's Instagram, Wild Heart Resin Art.